Okay, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the globe. We welcome you to live from our livingrooms.com. This is a wonderful idea festival for the entire week through the 7th of April. Just want to thank the folks that put it together, a lady named Tana, Owen, Sirintip, and my daughter Lydia took care of the PR. And I want to thank them very much for their efforts. Of course, we are in the middle of quite a scene here. That's why we're in our homes, as you've been seeing all week, or studios, with the virus that's going around. Hopefully the music can be an antidote to the suffering that's going on. And on one final note, I'm going to dedicate this to the memory of Wallace Roney, who was a really good, one of the great trumpet players who just passed on. Oh, donate, yes. Of course, the idea is to donate. I think you can see everything at the bottom is right. Donate New York City Musicians COVID Relief Fund, and then at the end, I'll remind you again, but this is to raise money to give the musicians, right, who are out of work. We all are. So I chose the topic because it's ecumenical. It is, one person already asked me, is this only for saxophone players? And it's obviously for wind instruments, but it also is for everybody. In fact, sometimes one of the criticisms that I often have of somebody's playing, if it's a student, is that there is no breath. That is kind of a run-on sentence. When you have to, only your fingers have to worry about for the piano or the guitar or the bass. You could easily get into let's say, an ongoing conversation, which may be musically correct, but could also be with a little bit of space. So if you have breath control, it'll affect everything you do. Plus, obviously, there are things in life that good breath and good breathing can enable one to do. So I will, of course, get to that at some point. There are some things, of course, that are, as I said, ecumenical, where breathing is important because it supports sound. A good breathing, meaning something like about 80%. So, in other words, you're breathing now, everybody watching, or anybody who's alive, you're using about 6% of your capacity. This is a round figure. It means about, 2/3 or so. But there is, of course, a little bit more left over, and it can never be 100% breathing. But we can try to raise the ratio of the breath to the non-breath to get maybe closer to 75 or 80. And that little extra jolt is kind of what can really put us over the top as far as control of breathing. If you have a control of the breath, you'll have a whole bunch of nuances and things open up a little bit more, apparently. So there are some particular reasons for horn players, but again, I just want to mention public speakers who, of course, need good breath and good diction and, of course, power in their voice. Anybody in sports, this is, of course, number one, which is how do we, get energy for what we're doing. And, of course, childbirth to relax the cervix, to have that activity go smoothly. And in general, of course, for those who have tried or are into meditation, breathing is a gigantic component of meditation, and the teachers and the sensei, whoever, in karate and martial arts, they will definitely be on the case with breathing. They make a big deal out of it, a lot more than we do here in the Western world. And in general, just good health. I always use this metaphor. If you were in the street and you saw a car accident and somebody is laying on the ground and, bleeding or whatever, what is the first thing that you would say to them? Probably help is on the way, calling 911 or whatever. But probably, depending on who's doing the talking, the next step would be take some deep breaths, relax, because that will be a way of you trying to confront the situation and not be overexcited, which exasperates it. So there are plenty of non-musical reasons for being able to raise that ratio to 60 to 75%. But in general, for a wind player, there are three specific musical aspects that a good breath will help to promote. The goal is efficiency of energy, to use whatever energy you have to dive right into the blowing breath situation and not waste it and just keep things at an economical and efficient. In fact, one way of looking at playing an instrument is the goal is kind of to be efficient on your instrument, to not waste energy, to let the energy go for musical reasons and other aspects. But the actual mechanics of playing, of blowing, of horn player's case of fingering, that should all be pretty automatic and not have to be thought about too much. So that's kind of what our overall goal is. So what are these three aspects that a good breath enable you to do it? Now, usually in a class situation, we go around the table and find out what you think. But there are definitely three reasons. Number one is for volume. Now, I'm in my apartment in New York City. I haven't been playing too loud at all. So I'm going to just talk it down, but, we'll do a demonstration later. It's pretty obvious volume, especially in this age, or since the 60s and certainly the 70s, when electric instruments became more common. Somebody playing a keyboard or a guitar can just plug in, play up to 11, and rely on the electricity and so forth. And of course, I hate to talk about it, like a flute player or a saxophone player in the middle of an electric situation is sometimes quite an disadvantage as far as volume goes. So one definite reason why a good breath is necessary is to be able to have a volume level that will be commensurate with the music and the instruments around you. Obviously, in a duo with a guitar player, saxophone, not going to play loud. But in a big band, when you have to solo in front of like 18 pieces, you have to be able to get a good breath for volume's sake. Number two, and this is a more musical reason, length of line. In jazz, great example of somebody, and depending on the period of time you listen to Sonny Rollins, but Sonny was, one of the great things about Sonny was that he could play a line that was like, I'll say 32 bars of chorus or something like that, but he could play really long lines. And that means that the breath was there ready to serve him. I could give you an example here, but basically if I start playing and I'm really developing something and I'm in the 9th bar or 14th bar, something like that, and I run out of breath, this would be a tragedy. Because after all, coming up with a line that was more than 4 bars long was enough of a challenge. But to be stuck at the end, have the rug pulled out because I run out of volume, little. Well, I wouldn't want to do that, so I have to be ready with the breath. We get a little bit into the actual exercises. The breath knows what it needs and what it wants to do. It knows how to go from pianissimo to forte. It knows how to go from the length of a line. We just have to get it to unleash its power. And finally, the third thing, of course, is the one that is color, sound, the timbre, sonority, all meaning in this conversation the same thing, which is the color of the sound. And also, especially for example, the soprano saxophone, or instruments that are more in the middle and high register, we also often say we need support. In other words, we need to get those notes that are in the high register that sound thin and a little bright, maybe a little bit too brilliant, to be able to tone them down. And remember, when we play, of course, I'm not pretending here, but when we play certain notes on the saxophone in the left hand, we're only using that much of the horn to vibrate. So there's always a little bit of a deficit of, color abilities, the ability to colorize the sound, especially when you go up into the higher register. So, for example, if I play two examples, A and B, A will be a shallow breath, and B will be with a deeper breath. Let's see if there's any difference. And then. You hit the difference. You should hit the first note. The first example had a little bit more body to it. Not to be confused with volume, excuse me, but more bottom to the sound, making it a little bit more pleasing, especially in soprano. That's a big challenge. In fact, maybe the biggest challenge of soprano saxophone compared to the alto tenor, of course, baritone, is that we have this very small amount of metal or brass being vibrated, and we are responsible to fill in what's left, and that has to happen between the throat and the larynx and vocal cords. That's a saxophone lesson I'm not going to cover today. But for the sake of our conversation, it means that you have control of the breath, that you can change the sound of the note just by changing the breath control, the direction of the breath, and all the kind of nuances that happen really right up here, only up here, with the fingers being the result of what we do up here. So just to review, why, or what are the advantages of having a good breath, good, deep, full breath? Number one, volume. Number two, length of phrase or line. And number three, color, sonority, ambiance. I like that word also. So these are some musical reasons, and these are horn player reasons. But again, if you go to the other instruments, depending on the touch and the way the musician's playing it, they also have the nuances available. Of course, it's not exactly like breathing like it is for a horn player. But of course, singers are what comes to the singers are the extension of the horn, and the singers know this very well. In fact, I remember taking some singing lessons because I wanted to get a little closer to what goes on in the throat and the larynx and the head control and so forth. And I remember the teacher saying to me, he said, when you play high, think low, and when you play low, think high. In other words, offset the natural tendency to go in high is to push up and full up and everything. And you want to keep a bottom, keep something in a more round sound and more ability to color it. And when you're going down, you don't want to be biting up and make the sound go up. So that's a natural tendency that you want to counteract. I thought it was very interesting when teachers told me that. I never thought of such details. Okay, just to make sure we're good. Okay, so we're going to be talking about three-part breathing. This is partially hatha yoga and general meditation and breathing exercises and so forth. And usually those masters from that part of the world talk about three-part breathing. Three-part breathing means basically you have the ribs expanding, the diaphragm lowering, and the abdomen enlarging. That's the main action. That's enabling the air to come up and to be a good, good steady source. So for the sake of teaching and for the sake of demonstration, I will divide it into three parts. Although, of course, in the end, we're not going to be sitting on the bandstand thinking number one, number two, number three, obviously. But for practice sake, it's always good to, in general, as a rule of practice and sidebar, is to try to organize things in little bits of information that you can easily practice and repeat, and then worry about the cumulative effect later on. So we'll do that. So the first thing is, of the three aspects, is to get the air from there outside. Hopefully it's good air, and get it to go down as if in a drain down to the bottom, or like a well, collecting the water, pulling it from the bottom. And that means to expand the abdomen area. Now, a few words just to cover it. Stomach, abdomen, same. For the sake of conversation, same is fine. You know what I mean? Also, though, is very important, and this for many years had me confused. The diaphragm. Diaphragm is a muscle. It is dome-shaped. It descends when the air comes in, and it ascends when the air goes out, pushing the air, helping to push the air through. It is, according to my teacher, when I studied this with Joe Allen, great guru of saxophone teaching, he would say, you want to get a feeling that the stomach or abdomen is expanding, enabling the air to come in, because air will rush into an empty space. It will do that. So the number one thing is to get the abdomen area, and by the abdomen area, I mean basically the belt line. The backbone line. It means really right near the belt line is. And if you do a circle, a C, and you put your thumb on your belly button, and you just make a comfortable like that, not like that, not like that, but just natural like this. This is the area that is going to expand and to inhale and exhale. So that's important. We're going to talk about that in a minute because that's very important. Now, the second area, and one that we're all doing now, again, unless we're running a 4-minute mile or sports or things I spelled out beforehand, just for ordinary life, ordering a cappuccino, talking ordinarily in a small room where power to the voice is not crucial, the chest expands. It's the rib cage, and it expands. It follows orders from the bottom. First, expansion of the abdomen area. Number 2, lungs, ribs, chest, whatever you want to call it, opening up. And then finally, the upper part, which does a little bit, I don't want to get too confused here, there's a little bit of a lift when we finish the breath, as if to push through, coming from the chest area through the larynx and the voice box and everything like that into the oral cavity to be used for playing. And now this is definitely horn-player stuff, so just bear with me, those horn players. So this is a 1, abdomen, 2, chest area, 3, shoulders, upper shoulders. And you gotta be careful. We don't want the upper shoulders to be this. This is not what it is. It's just that there's a follow through of motion. So let me see if get the picture here. Okay. Now, I would be standing ordinarily, but for today's sake, I would be sitting down. You can do this sitting down. It's not as dramatic, obviously, but you can do it. And that's why you can practice this really in the middle of a subway if you want. Okay, so I'm going to be inhaling, and for the sake of the exercise, we do inhale through the nose, and we do the exhale through the mouth. Of course, that's the same as playing saxophone or singer, so we're now getting a little closer to the reality of what we do, which is, of course, to emanate sounds to come through. So we try to use the nose. One of the guides, the roles of the nose is the hair is supposed to clean the air. I don't know about that, but I would like the cycle to be like that, because if it goes through the nose and then back down the chest, I'm getting like a circular thing, and that's a groove that I can imitate. So 1 is expanding the abdomen through the nose. 2 is a feeling of the chest slightly coming up. And then that final, just there, you saw the shoulders exhibit a slight pull up. And exhale will be reverse, will blow out, and the shoulder, chest will relax. And then finally, when we get back to the abdomen, we are going to push all the air out by pulling in the skin and the stomach all the way in. If you watch pictures of yogis and guys in India and all that, and they do breathing exercises, and they do this pulling in of the abdomen. They call it trying to touch the kundalini. I don't want to get too heavy or get off the track here. But the kundalini is the bottom chakra, has something to do with the spine and so forth and so on. And what they're saying is, if they can get their stomach or stomach muscles to go in to touch the back, in a sense, they've had a complete breath. Now that's of course a little bit much, but remember these guys are sitting there 8 hours a day, so they have a thing they can use. But for us, we're not going to do that. But we're going to pull the stomach in. We're going to put it in and try to get all the air. So again, let's see if it's standing up. Okay. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, and out. Blow. 3, 2, 1, and out. So again, 1, 2, 3, and out. 3, 2, 1. Again, 1, 2, 3, and out. Now you note that, of course, the exhale and the abdomen really work a little bit harder than everything else, because that's where all the action is. And that's where the sound, that's where we're going to have the effect of the sound color. That's the color that's going to, one of the reasons that we're doing this on the horn, because that colors the sound. It's like me singing. Do, 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 or do, 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 do. Of course, I get a little more depth, an appearance of more volume, but definitely more air to play around with and so forth. So it's a 3-part for the sake of the exercise. And then, of course, after you do it for a couple of weeks, something like that, with 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And of course, it's just the flow. It's the flow up and flow down, and it's as smooth as possible. Maybe something like this. I'm just thinking flow, flow. Okay, so practicing. My suggestion is twice a day, 10 deep breaths. With the final breath, I'll give you what we're doing, number 10. And this, if it takes 3 minutes, it's unbelievable. This goes now back to a little bit of what other reasons are for a good breath. And of course, here, if you do this in the morning and the evening, you're going to get a nice level of relaxation. Usually when I have students do this and they haven't ever done deep breathing in this way, they usually feel a little dizzy on top because, it's the first time they're doing it, and a little bit, like, wow, where'd that air come from? Well, that air is in here. It's like a reservoir that's waiting to be used. And that's what this is about. This is about bringing up the air through the whole scene. I mean, that created, we had a very long breathing apparatus. I mean, it must have been a reason for it. So, besides just making people taller, there's a reason for it. When you get to number 10, you're going to do an exaggerated pumping of the abdomen in and out. So in other words, nose, mouth. Now, if you were here in front of me, I'd have you put your hand up here and feel the air that I'm exhaling, how it really is much more than you think it is. In fact, I could just time it now for the sake of the video. A little more. So when I say deep breath, I want you to start with the, with the inhale, and I want you to do the exhale like this, as long as you can do it. As much air as you can find in the abdominal area. Now, a few caveats to be aware of. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, when we get to the number 3, or we're still counting the activities, when we get to the top of the shoulder area, you don't want your lifting up. It is a follow-through action of the chest rising, which is a follow-through action of the abdomen expanding. So it's all one big thing, number one. Number 2, if I may, this should not be hard. It is not going to the bathroom. It is relaxed but firm. So when I have students, I kind of come around and say, take a little feel of what's going on. It's not mushy, but it's not that either. It's just in between. It's in between soft and firm. That's all. Because, you don't want any tension. This is not an exercise. That's not supposed to build more tension. We're trying to take tensions away by getting a good breath. We don't need any more anxious kind of moments, something like that. So this is firm, maybe a little bit soft at times, but not to be too hard or too soft. So I'm going to demonstrate the 10, and for now we'll start at number 7. And this is always good. This is a sort of meditation. This is good when you close your eyes and you follow the air in your imagination, make it a color, make it blue or whatever, and just really shut out the rest of the world for the sake of these 10 deep breaths 2 times a day, with the 10th being the pumping action. Okay, so I'm going to be number 7. Number 9. Number 10, before the pumping, do the regular 10th breath. A nice little meditation twice a day. Now, there's a way of adding a little bit more air. We've been concentrating on the front. I want to talk a little bit about the sides and some extent the back. Not the back, but basically, I want to see, is there any air possible in this part of the breathing apparatus? And if I concentrate, I can find it. And it's very little, but it can help the sound. But the first thing I have to do is I have to, in order to feel something, you sometimes have to do exaggerations, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block off the air of everywhere except here. And this will, you have to trust me because you're not here to feel it. But usually I would have the student put their hands here and they'll feel it going like that. So this is, I'm going to bend over, put my hands on the love handles, and I'm going to do the deep breathing that I just did, standing, sitting or standing. I'm going to just do it normally. And I'm going to feel with my hands on the sides right here. I'm going to see if I feel a little bit of expansion. Yes. This is cut down. This is just in and out. No, nothing with the abdomen necessarily. In fact, the abdomen is being cut off here. Now, as soon as I can feel it in this position, obviously I'm not going to live my life in this position or play a low C like this. I'm going to try to slowly raise up and see how much of that feeling in the sides I can retain until I get back to here. And then, of course, it's what we just did a few minutes ago. So I'm like here. Here, 45 degrees. And then I'm rushing through, of course, but then finally back up here. And can I remember that? Does the body memory work? It definitely does. And I do it here. You can see my hands here. Let's see. Yeah. Another way of feeling is to cut off the left and right side. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to put pressure on here, cut this down so it's very inactive, and notice what will happen here. This will compensate for that. This will take up more air. So I'm like cutting it off by bending over, and then I'm doing the deep breathing, not as deep, but deeper than normal. And sure enough, and then vice versa. Cut this off, allow this to do its thing. Now maybe you gain 5%. And of course, you're not necessarily going to be using that when you play, which we're going to go to next. But it is a sensation and a feeling of a full breath that is enhanced by even getting the sides and to some extent the back involved. And making the realization that it's this whole tube, right from here, from the side, from the stomach, abdomen area, up through the chest, up here, into that. Again, the diaphragm, just to repeat, takes care of itself. Don't worry about it. You don't know you have a diaphragm, so don't think about it. Again, I was just mentioning, I was reading books on breathing when I was taking the lessons, and I got very confused because of the diaphragm. I didn't know what they meant. I really didn't understand it. Don't worry about it. It's nothing to do with what we're talking about here. You don't know you have a diaphragm unless you get ill, and then, of course, it's a different story. Okay, now, a little bit more, and then I think we could. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to go to, after, well, I'll give you a schedule after, but basically 3 to 6 months of these exercises. The full breath 2 times a day, 10 times with the stomach pumping, and of course using this little air in there. And that, remember, what I did is to remind you of what it's about so that the body can remember it when it does that. Now you do that for 3 to 6 months like that. And by the way, this is a kind of a meditation. What you're doing is you're slowing down everything around you and yourself in order to concentrate 100% on the breath. And that's in life not that easy to get that kind of peace and silence in order to be able to do something as subtle as the air stream is what we're dealing with here. Now, of course, finally, now we got to go to the instrument. Now we'll get back to its use for saxophone, in my case, saxophone. We're now going to do exactly the same thing, but instead of me blowing out into space, I'm going to be blowing into the horn. That's all. So again, because we're in the apartment, I'm not going to play too loud, but hopefully you can get the point. So I'm doing the full breathing exercise, except the end of it is going to be vibrating the reed. And middle range too. Of course, standing up would be a little bit more feasible and more real. But again, even sitting down, you can still get that. And by the way, a little sidebar here. Long tones. I remember, I don't know where along the line of my studies, I got the impression that playing long tones is quite important. And one day, Joe Allen said to me, he said, there's no such thing as long tones. There's note to note and what you do with it, but it's not necessarily a long tone. And what I came up with here, or I guess with him too, was that long tones are very good to concentrate on one at a time of blowing. Because again, like we just did with the breathing exercise, we're slowing everything down. So for example, here's some definite practices that long tones show me. First of all, spit or saliva. That little crackling, we don't want that. So of course, one thing to do is not too sanitary, but to suck out this excess air, and then it's much cleaner. Crescendo and decrescendo, obviously. So now I'm going to be doing, this is good because this really makes you understand your breath and what you need and when you need it, because you're not going to have anybody marking it. You're going to know when the crescendo is over to start the decrescendo just by hearing it, and by after a while, your breathing will help you find that place where the apex is. So. And at the end, add saliva. Again, one more time. Okay, that is a rough one. That takes time. Pre and post tones. This is especially true on flute, is where I first learned it. And that means that practicing the attack and the decay of a note. I think there's nothing more troublesome to me is when I hear myself cut off a note at the end of a phrase. And it had nothing to do with, there was no reason for it. It's like, that's, you only do that because it's the end of a phrase and you want to give it some dramatic. But I like it to be more of a pre-tone, that means air into note. And mezzo, we just practice volume, so not again. And then back down, and when we go back down, we're going to go back to air. So it's going to be note, 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 back down to air. Okay, that's good. Again. No. Okay, that's pretty hard also, because the saliva starts to kick in when you get softer. I got to be careful with that. Obviously, intonation, using a pitch machine for you. I mean, that's a whole other thing, of course. We only play two notes, and we get reason to between an A and a C, and you get the. If you don't want to shake, you want to use the pitch machine and see that you can stay on the 440 or wherever it is. It doesn't move around. That's another reason for low tones. And of course, just, which I can't do here, is of course real volume. In other words, start soft and go as loud as you can, and then back down, like the scale, back down. So you know when to do this. So these are just some sidebars about long tones. So when you say to a student to practice long tones, I advise you as a teacher to give them an exact reason why you're doing the long tones this week as compared to maybe next week or whatever. And then the long tones become more useful rather than just some decoration and take up time. They become really practical things, beginning and ending notes, volume, intonation, disturbance of sound, could do the saliva or any other complications and so forth. So it all becomes part of the thing. Okay, I have one story that I like to tell about Miles Davis. of course, as soon as you say that, everybody goes, oh, yeah, well, here we go with an oh, yeah story. I played with Miles for about 18 months, 16, 17 months in 73 and 74. And when I left the band to do my own group, Look Out for Him, after about 6 months, I decided I'd go visit the master. Now, you know, when you have a mentor, especially somebody of that magnitude, you show respect. I mean, this guy or woman or whoever took you on a journey and made your life, quote, your artistic life possible. Had one contributing factor towards that. So you always look at your master. Usually you don't know this when you're young. When you get a little older, you go, like, that guy really straightened me out. So I thought I would go up and pay my respects, see how Miles was doing. I had a good relationship with him, so it was just a matter of ringing the doorbell and see what would happen. So I ring the bell. He was on 78th Street, and I come in, and the first floor was like a little garden area, kitchen area, and a pool table and the instruments and amps and stuff like that. And then upstairs where he lived. So he said, "Who is it?" I said, "Dave." He said, "Come up." And of course, the voice, you know, that raspy voice. And I go inside, and I'm walking up the steps, and he's at the top step, leaning on the banister. And he don't say nothing. So I'm going, you know, my leg, you know, I'm doing one step at a time. And I get to the top step, and he gives me a right jab to the stomach. And then he says, "You like being a band leader, I can tell." What was he doing? He definitely wasn't trying to hurt me. He could have done that too. But, you know, and I had done some boxing with him, gone to the gym. I like boxing, what I could do. And he was checking out my constitution. He was seeing if I was in good shape. I mean, God forbid I should go walk in there and be disheveled and be like, you know, a little bit weird. And say, "You get out of here, clean your act up." Oh, he didn't do that, thank God. He was very friendly and very nice. And then we started talking, and then we had somebody asking and so forth and so on. But my point is for this conversation, the breath control is crucial to your music. People hear sound before they hear anything else. The first thing they hear is sound, and they're going to go, "That's number one, that's number two." If you hear Hank Mobley, you know 2 bars of Hank Mobley, not based on what he played, but how he played it tone-wise. Then you hear Dexter Gordon, and though they may be close in some ways, they're very far in other ways. Saxophone is a great instrument for tone, for individuality of sound. It engenders itself to having a million different sounds we connect up with the saxophone. If you think of a list of saxophone players, tenor and alto especially, you could hear that sound in your head, probably 15 or 20 of them. We could do it, you know, right now. So good breathing means that after a minute, I learned to control the airstream to enhance the art. So I could be here all day with just that voice and just play it differently, all based on color. Nothing to do with the fingers, nothing to do with knowing chords or not knowing chords. It's just sound, and that's the most important thing, and that's what people will hear first when they listen to you. Okay?
I have some questions.
Any questions?
I have a few.
You want to come on?
No. My voice is fine. So we have 2 questions.
Yeah.
And just a note too, if the buffer, if the screen or something was out a little bit, so we have to have a little connectivity, this will be available for at least 24 hours on the website, so you can watch the whole thing from start to finish if you miss anything, by the way. So we have 2 questions here. If you have more questions, just ask them and I will read them. We have one question here from Tim. He says, "Do you know what breathing exercises Sonny Rollins used to do?"
I do not know. If he did, I would assume Sonny Rollins did because he did everything. I'm not privy to that information.
Next, this is from Carol, and she says, "Speaking of breath control, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, how was his playing even humanly possible?"
He was a freak. That's how. He was an extraordinary. He was a really good player. I mean, he had his bag of tricks because of those horns, mancello and stritch, tenor, nose flute. He was quite a sight to see, as you can look on the videos. Really, with all this stuff hanging around his neck. And he knew when to play what note, what instrument, with what fingering. It was unbelievable. He had a lot of energy, and he was really great at fast tempos. That's what I remember about Masano. Okay. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Are we good? Managed to get into Carnegie Hall to see Miles. Okay. I reloaded. Okay. Mr. Good to see you. Thank you. So that's it. Any more questions? Okay.
Tony asks, are there any suggestions for applying this to guitar players?
As I think I said in the beginning, not directly because you're not using your ass stream to produce a note, but in a more figurative way. The way you start and end notes, the color that you employ, and of course depends on your amp and the top. But these are all aspects that we just covered. Obviously, you're not blowing into a mouthpiece and getting a reed to vibrate. But you are producing sound, and sound is produced by a human being who has to breathe. So we've got to consider the question of what the air stream is going to do when we're playing, or when we're playing and when we're not playing, even if it's not the home, it's not the mode of playing the instrument. It's, it's not just the air, it's electric. But with some imagination, Tony, I bet you can find out how the air stream relates to the sounds you get on a guitar. That's interesting. Anything else?
Yes, quite a few. Okay.
Oh, quite a few.
Guys, please ask your questions on the Ask a Question thing so that we can see them all. That would be helpful for me. But here's another question for now. Hi, Dave. I'm a beginner on the saxophone doing exercises on the mouthpiece. When I hit an eighth octave ninth, my stomach tenses up quite a bit. I was wondering, how tense should my stomach feel towards the end of the breath when I'm hitting higher notes during my mouthpiece practice?
Very good. First of all, that you're using mouthpiece practice, which is a great way to build your oral imagination, your chops. I can't tell without actually, this is one of the disadvantages of teaching like this, and of course with an instrument like the saxophone, you really got to kind of be there. At least I should have one lesson with people, I'm 2 feet away from them. I can't tell you why, because it's personal, but the fact that you're aware of it means that did I get it right, the ninth note or the eighth note, whatever it is, if you're 7/8 there, and probably whatever you were doing for the other 7 notes, you probably want to try to employ for that eighth note. Could be a quirk why that pitch doesn't, why that particular note doesn't lay right, or makes some more tension in your body or something like that. But I wouldn't fret about it either. I mean, these exercises, this long tone exercise, the one we're talking about that you must know about from Joe Howland, mouthpiece alone. Of course, the very important overtone exercises is a whole other thing. They are tools to get your sound together. You're not going to go out there and necessarily play those things, although we could play multiphonics and stuff these days. But you're there to use these tools to enhance your sound, to learn more about your connection between you and your instrument. An instrument is a piece of brass. You have a body that's vibrating. It's the vocal cords that are vibrating, the lips are vibrating, the reeds vibrating, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of little factors that go into playing the instrument. And one of the things about the saxophone is that, a little bit like I mentioned earlier, it's not that difficult to get a lesson this way. It's desirable to really try to find your own sound. And with experience and copying other sounds that you like, it might be plausible. But my point is, Tony, I wouldn't get it hung up on that the one note doesn't work that well. Don't worry about it. Just continue to do your 7 notes up to that one.
Chad would like to know, are there any suggestions on books related to breath control exercises?
Besides mine, but we just did it basically. I don't know of any, but there are books about breathing and meditation and all that kind of stuff. But nothing directly that I know of into the saxophone, except for what I do and what Joe used to do in short order.
Okay, just a few more. This is from Dylan Jones. He wants to know, can these breathing exercises help improve the timbre of the instrument?
Well, that's the whole point. Not about improve, but find your timbre that suits you. In other words, you have in your ear the capability of having a sound that you like, and you want to get that instrument to portray what you want. I remember Phil Woods telling me once a funny story. It's very short. You know, when somebody likes the way you play, they come up to you and say, "What kind of horn you got?" and so forth, and that kind of stuff. So if somebody did that to Phil and said, "Jim, what kind of horn you play, man? The horn sounds great." And then Phil took this alto and he put it next to his ear and he said, "I don't hear anything." That's the point. You are in control of that piece of brass, and your imagination plus technical things. And these things we've been discussing technically that did apply to the horn that we just discussed. They're all little roots, little roads leading to what sound you really want and who you are sound-wise.
We are going to, okay, so no more questions because we have too many. So one question, if you haven't asked already, that is, one question that we do have is if you have any tips for ear training.
My wife is an expert on this. She will have hopefully short order of doing this exact same thing. I didn't learn ear training as in any kind of academic way. In fact, I didn't learn jazz in an academic way. In the 60s, my time of learning, my main period. In the 60s, there was really not many people teaching this music of any sort. Probably to get ear training in a conservatory. But this is a question that I would put to my wife, who has a whole system on this. And it's a very important component of ear training, and it's not sometimes not given fair, a fair break. I mean, it's like, it can be tedious, it can be boring, but it also is extremely beneficial. So you might want to get some courses online. I'm sure Berkeley has something with ear training. And, you can get something from that, I hope. Mom's name, Caris, C-A-R-I-S, excuse me. My lovely wife, Caris.
All right, so just a few more questions, and then we're going to be done. This is a question that says, does the mouthpiece really make a big difference, or a good player can get a nice sound from any properly faced mouthpiece?
Well, you got it right there. Just the second part of that sentence is the point. The mouthpiece is a vehicle for you. It's a vehicle that we just discussed. It's like what you hear in your head and your ability to get it out. Certainly there are differences in mouthpieces, especially material, wood, rubber. They're making those colorful ones in Paris now. It looks like plastic. With differences between mouthpieces, the first part of your sentence comes true. I mean, a good musician, a good saxophone player, is understanding the principles of what's vibrating and how it feels, and pretty much can take any mouthpiece. I used to, when I would go to lessons with Joe Allen, he would invariably do something you could never do now. He would take right at me and say, "Give me that mouthpiece." I'd give it to him, and he plays it. And this reads all right. This mouthpiece could be a little bit more open, but it's okay. He would check you out, make sure that you were on the right path. So I think a mouthpiece has a difference, but it often leads to too much money for the difference. And really, is there such a large difference that needs to be negotiated? I'm not so sure. I know that spending a lot of money is really a little bit of a travesty.
All right, so our last question for now. This is from Miguel. Not sure if you can answer, but he says, do you have any tricks or tips when you cannot make sound or noise because of your neighbors?
Well, we're doing this for the first time. We've been here about 6 months, and I have a light on it. So I don't know. I hope it'll go by. I'm not going to play loud in here, but I would like to teach piano over here. I would like to do some teaching like this. All right? So with private lessons, you let them know you do them. Yes, you can get in touch with me, of course, on my website. And don't forget to please put a donation into this cause and this wonderful week. This is the first day, and it's going on through April 7th. And a great lineup. You go online, you see who's playing. Some people I'm not familiar with, and all seemingly duos for the most part, which of course is a little easier to do. And then, let's see how many people have trouble with their neighbors after they do their little dance next week. Okay. Thank you for your attention, and good luck to you all.